She was the heart of her family and a light to everyone who walked into her store. A devoted mother of 3 sons, Alexis Hill worked 50 hours a week, building a future for her grandchildren. But on June 23rd, an ordinary Tuesday workday turned into a bloodbath over something so trivial it defies belief.
Topping our news, the manager of a Columbus Dollar General store is dead tonight after police say a customer shot her after a small purchase, then later opened fire on police at a separate scene.
That would lead to an officer-involved shooting that left the suspect dead and a police officer and K-9 officer injured.
This was no accident. This was a systemic failure. A criminal with 6 arrests had walked out of prison just 30 days before the murder. The victim had a premonition of danger, yet the system allowed a monster to return to the checkout counter. You are watching Crimson and Crown, and let's begin. Listen to me, y'all. To mostly everybody living out in Columbus, that Dollar General store over on Victory Drive was just a regular, everyday spot where you'd pop in to grab some milk, a loaf of bread, or some household cleaning items. But for dozens of their regular customers, that store stood for somebody very special. The store manager, a beautiful black woman named Alexis Hill. Sister Alexis was the kind of woman whose pure presence just made that whole building feel a little safer, a little warmer, and a whole lot more human. Everybody shopping in there knew that if Alexis was working that shift, you were going to be greeted with a bright smile and a calm, patient soul who always found the time to lend a helping hand. Now, Alexis was born right there at Fort Benning back in 1981, and her whole entire life was tied to that community. She graduated from Kendrick High School and Columbus Technical College, and she put her time in across the board, working everywhere from McDonald's all the way up to Dillard's. Every single stop on her journey taught her something new, but it was when she stepped into that manager role that her true gift really shined. And baby, that gift was her deep, genuine love for her people. Her co-workers will tell you she'd stay late after her shift without complaining if somebody needed extra help. She wasn't one of those bosses who just barked orders. She led by example, pouring her heart into the work and making sure every single person walking through those doors felt seen and valued. But as much as she loved her job, once she took off that work uniform, Alexis was the absolute beating heart of a big, tight-knit family. As a mother to 3 sons, Jaden, Christopher, and Michael, she wasn't just their rock, she was their absolute best friend. But let's be real, in her later years, the real center of her universe became her grandbabies, Jakias and Caden. To those little ones, she was just GG. And Lord knows she wore that title like a badge of honor. She'd bring those babies to church services with her all the time because she wanted them to grow up feeling that same spiritual foundation that carried her through life. Her family still holds on to her favorite sayings, like, "We are all we got," which became the ultimate motto for how they stuck together through thick and thin. Alexis had a joy for living that was downright contagious, and it touched everything she did. That sister loved to travel, especially getting out on a cruise ship or taking a girls' trip where she could just let her hair down, dance, and live in the moment. She was heavy in the boss ladies community in the Eastern Star, where folks respected her for her determination and strong will. She was also a faithful member over at Life Church of Columbus, working hard in the Cultivate women's ministry. To her church family, she wasn't just somebody sitting in the pews. She was a true sister who always had an encouraging word and a warm smile ready for you. And her love for Columbus didn't stop at work or church either. Alexis volunteered with the Scouts, backed local school programs, and showed up for community sports events. She was the go-to person when somebody fell on hard time, whether that meant organizing a donation drive for a family in need or just sitting down to give some solid, godly advice. Her brother Jonathan said one of the very last things she did was pack up some supplies for somebody who was struggling. Helping folks wasn't just something Alexis did on the side. It was the very core of who she was. That's exactly why so many people in Columbus looked at her as way more than just a store manager. She was somebody you could count on no matter what. Her team and her regular shoppers knew she had a special gift for keeping the peace even when things got crazy. That store on Victory Drive had seen its share of foolishness over the years, but whenever Alexis was on the floor, she brought a sense of calm and order to the whole place. She could diffuse an angry customer with just one steady look or a soft joke. To her, that Dollar General wasn't just a clock-in, clock-out job. Every day, she carried her responsibilities with a level of care and respect for people that a lot of folks only truly realized after she was gone. Nobody in the world could have guessed that her dedication to her job and Her instinct to be helpful, right down to the very last second, would end up being a part of how her story tragically ended. Losing a woman like Alexis Hill left a massive hole in that city, a void that no corporate press release or bouquets of flowers left at the store entrance could ever fill. The community didn't just lose a good manager, they lost a woman who taught everybody around her what grace, dignity, and strength looked like. She showed us how an everyday person can be a real-life hero just by showing up, doing an honest day's work, and loving her family fiercely. On the morning of June 23, 2026, a normal workday on Victory Drive shattered into a nightmare. With Alexis Hill gone, Columbus lost a light that had spent years making that corner of the world a kinder place for anybody who walked inside. On that fateful morning, she was standing right there behind the register, patiently smoothing out crumpled dollar bills the same way she handled everything in life, with grace. She was doing it for a man the criminal justice system had just let walk out of prison a month prior, having no earthly idea that a simple transaction worth less than $2 would be the final moment of her life. Alexis Hill was taken from us, leaving behind a legacy of pure kindness that now has the whole city asking hard questions about the value of a human life and whether any of us are truly safe. All that was left behind were unanswered questions and a deep, heavy grief that forever changed the city of Columbus. Tuesday, June 23rd, 2026, was supposed to be just another regular summer day on the south side of Columbus, the kind of morning where you can already feel the Georgia heat rising early. Inside that Dollar General on Victory Drive, everything was moving according to routine. Folks were dropping in to grab their daily necessities, and 44-year-old manager Alexis Hill was right there at the front, keeping the checkout line running smooth. Right around 10 a.m., a man walked up to her register, a man police would later identify as 33-year-old Jerome Markey Willis. Now, this man only set one single item down on the counter, a pack of hamburger buns. There was absolutely nothing about him that stood out from the dozens of other customers who had walked through the doors that morning. Alexis scanned the buns, and the register screen flashed, $1.58. The man handed her two wrinkled, crumpled up $1 bills, and Alexis, just working her normal routine, started smoothing those bills out. And y'all, that exact second is when everything went terribly wrong. According to the investigation and what the security cameras captured, Alexis took the cash and did what any cashier does. She started flattening and straightening out the crumpled paper so it would lay flat in the register drawer. Detectives believe that this brief, everyday pause might have been what triggered this man's sudden, violent explosion. What happened next is something law enforcement can only describe as a completely unprovoked, senseless act of violence. While our sister was standing there focused on smoothing out those $1 bills, Willis, without saying a single word, without making a demand, without a warning in the world, pulled out a gun. He fired at her from close range, dealing Alexis Hill a wound she simply could not survive. What makes this whole thing even more heartbreaking is that there was no history between this killer and his victim. No past arguments, no personal beef, not even a minor disagreement in the aisle. This wasn't a robbery. This man didn't try to clear out the register or grab anything of value. A beautiful Black woman's life was stolen from her while she was just trying to do her job, all over a transaction that cost less than a cup of coffee. The second he pulled that trigger, Willis walked out of that store, leaving behind pure chaos and horror. Calls flooded the 911 dispatch lines almost instantly, and Columbus police cruisers came tearing down Victory Drive. When those officers ran inside, they walked into a grim reality that highlights just how unprotected retail workers really are. An open register setup where a manager had zero physical barrier between herself and whoever walked up to the counter. By 10:45 a.m., Muskogee County Coroner Buddy Bryan had to make the official pronouncement confirming Alexis Hill had passed away right there at the scene. They shut that store down immediately to start processing the evidence, and that yellow police tape went up around the entrance. A sickening sign that a place that was just a regular part of the neighborhood a few hours ago was now a crime scene. Digging into this stage of the tragedy brought up some serious, uncomfortable truths about safety in retail stores like this one. Investigators pointed out that the checkout area where Alexis stood didn't have any kind of protective glass or physical shield, things that ought to be standard in stores operating in higher risk areas. To Alexis, it was just another transaction. Take the cash, check it, and hand the customer their receipt. She had no way of knowing that those few seconds she spent trying to cash a man out would be her very last breaths on this earth. While the people of Columbus were reeling, trying to wrap their minds around losing Sister Alexis, the police had already kicked off a massive manhunt for Jerome Willis, a man who, in the blink of an eye, turned a $1.58 purchase into a nightmare that shook the entire city. And Lord have mercy, that shooting was just the start of the bloody trail Jerome Willis would leave across Columbus that day. Alexis Hill's death, right there at her register, surrounded by grocery shelves, became a tragic symbol of just how vulnerable everyday people are when senseless violence walks through the door. Her very last act on this earth was an act of patience, trying to smooth out the crumpled money this man handed her for some hamburger buns. Her death was only the first chapter of that day's horror. While her family and her community were left drowning in shock, law enforcement was scrambling to track down a shooter who was still armed, dangerous, and on the loose. For everybody who knew and loved Alexis Hill, that summer morning will always be remembered as the exact moment a normal workday turned into an unspeakable tragedy. A simple $1.58 sale became the final chapter in the life of a woman who was deeply loved, respected, and cherished throughout Columbus. On May 21st, 2026, Jerome Marquis Willis walked out of Dooley State Prison a free man after finishing up his latest sentence. But the real question folks are asking isn't just about the day he got out, it's about what went down after, and whether the criminal justice system should have seen this nightmare coming from a mile away. To the prison system, it was just another routine release, another inmate completing his time and walking out the gates. But for Willis, that release kicked off a short, deadly countdown that lasted exactly 33 days. Now, if you want to understand how this man ended up standing inside that Dollar General on Victory Drive with a gun in his hand, you have to look back at his history. A road paved with violence, system failures, and a man who threw away every single second chance he was ever handed. His rap sheet didn't just start with one mistake. It was a revolving door of arrests, prison time, getting out, and running right back to the street. Over a 16-year span, Jerome Willis had spent way more of his life sitting behind bars than he ever did walking free. The first huge red flag popped up way back in 2007. Willis was just a teenager when he caught an armed robbery conviction right there in Muskogee County. The judge slapped him with a 20-year sentence, ordering him to serve 10 of those years in prison. That should have been the wake-up call, the moment where a young man realizes he needs to turn his life around. But that is not what happened. Every time he got out, his time on the streets got shorter and shorter. After he was released the first time back in 2012, he only lasted a few months before he was right back in handcuffs. The years that followed were just more of the same tired story. New crimes, new convictions, and new trips back to the penitentiary. His record kept growing, piling up charges like possession of a firearm by a convicted felon, theft, and obstruction of law enforcement. Even putting him in a supervised facility couldn't keep him in line. While he was staying over at the Albany Transitional Center, Willis figured out how to beat the system and slip away. He literally just changed out of his uniform into regular street clothes and walked right off the property. To the authorities, that should have been a screaming siren telling them that standard rules and supervision meant absolutely nothing to this man. That escape showed a total disrespect for authority and a dangerous willingness to do whatever he wanted. With armed robbery, felony gun charges, and escape on his record, Willis showed time and time again that he could not and would not follow the law. And yet, despite all of that, the system somehow let him walk out into the world without the kind of heavy supervision a man like that required. But the deepest problem wasn't just his past, it was what the system ignored right before the end. Even after picking up fresh charges, including terroristic threats in both 2023 and 2024, Willis still managed to find his way back out of prison. Experts looking at this case point to a massive, fatal breakdown in how the state evaluates offender risk. How in the world does a repeat offender with a history of escapes and violent threats get labeled as inactive, meaning nobody was actively monitoring his day-to-day life? Why did the system make it so easy for a man with his background to get his hands on a firearm? That is the burning question everybody in Columbus was asking after the smoke cleared. A total lack of communication between the parole board and local police meant Willis was practically invisible right up until the second he pulled that trigger. Seeing him revert to cold-blooded murder just 33 days after getting out of prison forces us to ask the hard truth. Could this whole tragedy have been prevented? The justice system gave him chance after chance, but it completely failed to put safeguards in place to protect the community when he inevitably threw those chances away. Looking at his life, shows a man who was wrapped up in the criminal lifestyle from an early age, a man who looked at prison as just a temporary break between crimes, not a deterrent. Willis wasn't just breaking rules, he was living at war with society. When he walked into that Dollar General that morning, he carried 16 years of unmonitored danger with him. And after Alexis Hill was taken from us, that long criminal history became the center of a furious public debate about how our system handles violent repeat offenders once they get let out on the streets. Those 33 days of freedom weren't a test for Jerome Willis. They turned into a death sentence for Alexis Hill. Every single one of those 33 days, somebody in the system should have been checking on a man with a history of terroristic threats to make sure he wasn't arming himself again. Letting Willis out meant he was back in our neighborhoods, but without any real oversight. A man with a violent past was left completely free to destroy a family, a store, and a community without anybody stepping in to stop him until it was way too late. After those shots rang out inside that Dollar General around 10 a.m., the whole city of Columbus transformed into a full-blown tactical war zone. While the paramedics and investigators were rushing into Victory Drive, dozens of patrol cars and specialized Columbus police units kicked off a massive, high-speed manhunt to track down a killer who was still armed and running loose through the streets. Now, the cops had a clear description of who they were looking for, but they also knew damn well who they were dealing with. A career, institutionalized criminal with a history of escaping who wasn't about to just raise his hands and surrender peacefully. Every single minute that ticked by meant another innocent life was in danger, so they were moving with extreme urgency. Around 11:40 a.m., just an hour and 40 minutes after he stole Sister Alexis's life, officers spotted a man matching Willis's description over in the 3800 block of Baker Plaza Drive. Now, this was a busy commercial area packed with parking lots and heavy traffic, which made taking him down a whole lot more dangerous for everybody around. The officers moved in quickly to block off his escape routes and initiated a high-risk traffic stop, completely surrounding Jerome Willis and bringing this nightmare into a direct standoff. Those officers screamed at him multiple times to show his hands, but he just stood there dead silent, refusing to answer a single word. Within seconds, the whole situation reached a breaking point because this man was making it crystal clear he had zero intention of cooperating with law enforcement, acting erratic, aggressive, and unpredictable. Knowing they had to prevent a wild shootout in the middle of a crowded shopping area, the commanders on the scene made the call to deploy K9 Havoc, a highly trained police dog sent in to physically neutralize the threat so officers could move in for a safe arrest. Sending in a K9 unit is usually the quickest way to break a criminal's spirit and stop them from fighting back, and Havoc went charging right into harm's way to do his job. But Lord have mercy, Willis didn't care about a police dog either. The second Havoc got close, this man pulled out his firearm and started shooting. His first rounds tore straight into Havoc, but Willis didn't stop there. He pivoted and aimed his weapon dead at the officers surrounding him, escalating the standoff into a critical life or death shootout right there in broad daylight. Columbus police officers immediately returned fire to eliminate the threat, hitting Willis multiple times until he dropped right there on the pavement of Baker Plaza Drive. Even though medics tried to work on him, he was pronounced dead right there at the scene, ending his violent rampage for good. But taking him down didn't come without a heavy cost to the department. One officer took gunfire during the exchange and was rushed straight to a local hospital, where doctors treated him for non-life-threatening injuries. But poor K9 Havoc was in far worse shape, suffering critical, devastating gunshot wounds that required immediate specialist intervention. After vet techs stabilized him at a local clinic, Havoc's condition was still so grave they had to life flight him all the way to Auburn University's veterinary hospital, where emergency surgeons fought hard on the operating table to save the life of a dog who took bullets meant for those officers. With Willis dead on Baker Plaza Drive, the active terror of June 23rd was finally over, but it immediately opened up a whole new chapter of investigation and heavy scrutiny. Per standard protocol, agents from the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, the GBI, stepped in to take over the crime scene and conduct an independent review of the officer-involved shooting to ensure total transparency and keep the community's trust. This bloody manhunt across Columbus was a loud, horrifying example of how failures deep inside the prison system bleed out and become real-life terror on our city street. Havoc's bravery and those officers' quick trigger fingers stopped a wave of violence that could have taken way more lives that day. But once the smoke cleared, and the yellow tape came down, the city was left grappling with a deep, uncomfortable question. Was this really a successful police operation? Or was it just the bloody aftermath of a broken parole system that let an armed threat roam our streets after just 33 days of freedom? That shootout on Baker Plaza Drive left a permanent scar on Columbus. While the city honored the wounded officers and rallied around K9 Havoc as he started a long, painful road to recovery, the tragedy sparked a fierce debate that divided neighborhoods between folks demanding a tougher police crackdown and those fighting for systemic justice and accountability. When the guns finally went silent that afternoon, folks in Columbus felt a wave of relief that the immediate danger was gone. But the heartbreak, the burning questions, and the heavy consequences of that day had already changed their city forever. By the very next morning, a mountain of flowers, handwritten notes, and beautiful photographs of Sister Alexis started piling up right outside the front doors of that Dollar General on Victory Drive. Everyday folks who had just been in that store the day before, laughing with her across the checkout counter, were now standing on the sidewalk weeping in front of a makeshift memorial. Alexis's family pleaded with the city to remember her for the beautiful soul she was in life, not just as another victim of a violent crime, with her brother Jonathan asking folks to respect their grief and not let his sister turn into just another forgotten news headline. The community showed out in full force for their GG, quickly setting up a fundraiser to support her 3 sons and her sweet grandbabies, pouring love into the family she cherished so deeply. When her homegoing services were held in early July 2026 at the Life Church and Cathedral of Prayer, hundreds upon hundreds of people packed the pews. Everybody from her retail co-workers to regular neighborhood shoppers who just wanted to pay their respects to a woman who made their daily lives a little brighter. But while the city was mourning, a whole different firestorm blew up around a public statement made by Columbus Police Chief Stoney Mathis, whose choice of words set the community off. Some folks looked at the chief's statement and saw a leader showing the hard, necessary toughness you need after an innocent woman gets gunned down in cold blood. But a whole lot of other residents were deeply disturbed, questioning whether his tone crossed the line of professional law enforcement communication and basic human empathy, while a city was actively grieving. Social media turned into an absolute battlefield of hundreds of comments, with folks arguing over police ethics and professionalism just as loudly as they were talking about the shooting itself. And while all that was brewing, retail workers all across the nation looked at what happened to Alexis and started speaking out about how unprotected they really are on the clock. They pointed straight at those open cash registers, skeleton crew staffing, and the total lack of physical barriers between cashiers and whoever walks in off the street. Alexis's heartbreaking death became the catalyst for workers demanding bulletproof glass shields and automated cash handling systems so cashiers don't have to stand there completely exposed during a transaction. The community started calling out these massive retail corporations, demanding they stop focusing only on loss prevention and shoplifting and start spending money to physically protect the lives of the Black and brown women running their stores. But even with all those debates over store safety and police statements, the biggest, most infuriating question still hung over the city. How in the world did a man with a rap sheet that long end up walking our streets just 33 days before he committed murder? That single question became the absolute center of the aftermath because the speed of his relapse showed a catastrophic breakdown in communication between the state prison system and local parole supervision. It exposed massive, fatal blind spots in Georgia's re-entry and monitoring program, proving that high-risk chronic offenders were being let out without anybody keeping a real eye on them. Honoring Alexis Hill's memory has grown into something way bigger than leaving teddy bears and bouquets by a storefront. It's turned into a demand for real structural change. To the people of Columbus, this wasn't just a story about a random crime. It was a terrifying wake-up call, showing just how fast an ordinary Tuesday morning can turn into a permanent nightmare. The whole city woke up to the fact that keeping our neighborhoods safe doesn't just depend on how fast police cruisers can respond to a 911 call. It depends on holding the correctional system accountable for who they release into our community. Columbus learned the hard way that behind every cold statistic is a real, breathing human being. And in this case, it was our sister, Alexis Hill, a devoted mother, a proud grandmother, and a hardworking manager who was simply doing her job when her life was stolen. $1.58. Listen to me, y'all. In this story, that isn't just the price of a pack of hamburger buns. That tiny number is a symbol of absolute cruelty and a massive, unforgivable failure of the system. When we look back at the horrors of June 23rd, 2026, the heaviest question still hanging in the air is simply this: could this entire tragedy have been prevented? This wasn't just about one trigger pulled inside a dollar store. It exposed how reckless decisions made by the justice system way before that morning collided to destroy lives that had nothing to do with each other. On one side, you had Sister Alexis Hill, a shining example of hard work, kindness, and community love, left standing completely unprotected on the front lines of a retail store. On the other side, you had Jerome Willis, a career violent offender with a documented history of escapes and terroristic threats, handed total freedom without a scrap of real supervision just 33 days before he took a life. Could things have turned out differently? Absolutely, without a doubt in my mind. Every single step of this timeline had a turning point where somebody doing their job, an active parole monitor, or a simple protective glass barrier could have rewritten this entire ending. Today, the city of Columbus remembers Alexis Hill as way more than just a victim. She is remembered as a powerful woman whose heartbreaking story sparked a long overdue reckoning about workplace safety, institutional accountability, and the true value of a Black woman's life. This case stands as a cold, hard reminder that real safety isn't just about how fast the police show up with guns drawn. It starts with the justice system taking responsibility for every single chance it hands out to repeat offenders who refuse to change their ways. The world keeps right on spinning, but for Alexis's sons and grandbabies, time forever stopped at 10 a.m. on that summer Tuesday. And for the rest of us, her story will always be a painful reminder of the devastating, tragic consequences that can hide right behind the most ordinary moments of our daily lives.